Hi, friends. Welcome back to Shut Up, Tell Me More. My guest today is Jackie Orena, the granddaughter of Victor Little Vic Orena, a man federal prosecutors once described as an acting figure within the Colombo crime family. He is now 91 years old, suffering from dementia and significant health complications, and still serving what has effectively become a life ending prison sentence. Jackie has been in a very long fight for his compassionate release. She grew up with her father and grandfather incarcerated for organized crime involvement, and she speaks openly about the emotional toll of that experience. She also believes her grandfather's case was affected by serious irregularities and alleged corruption, which, in her view, makes the fight for compassionate release even more urgent. She's here to share what it's really like to watch a loved one age, decline, and struggle for adequate care behind guards. This conversation is not about judgment. It's not about glorifying organized crime or relitigating the past. This is a story about Jackie's perspective as a granddaughter and what compassion looks like in a system that rarely bends. And we're also going to get into Dose, Jackie's Westchester-based med spa where she specializes in Botox, fillers, weight loss, beauty treatments, and IV therapy. I cannot wait to hear about her entrepreneurial journey. And here is Jackie Orena. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me.
Of course, so we're going to get into Free Little Vic and the fight to get your grandfather out of being incarcerated. But before we get into that, I want to talk about Dose. You have your own med spa. When did it open?
So it's funny. It's actually a medical management company. So I actually ran a med spa for about 13 years and decided to branch off and do my own thing. And the space and the rules changed so much in New York. I decided to pursue the passions I had within that business, and that was the marketing and running the day to day. So I partnered with a medical team and we offer great services, everything from like IV infusions and peptides and weight loss and Botox and filler, all the things I love. So that's been a lot of fun.
I'm such a fan of all those things. How often can you get an IV infusion, by the way? Because I swear I could have one like daily.
People can do them weekly. It depends on the person. Some people get it done like once a month and they feel great. Other people want to do it weekly. It depends. I mean, it really depends on the person.
So, being that I'm sorry, say it again, it's like a medical, you said,
So it depends what you're getting too. So there's certain vitamins or certain cocktails that you can get. Certain things you might want to spread out a little bit more. Others you can do more often. But some people like to just get the IV fluid, the hydration weekly, and they
yeah.
can.
Yeah, that's so good. Like, if I could not drink water ever again and just get an IV every day, I would be so happy.
Backpack for you, have you walk around with.
Yes, I love that so much. So, do you have a studio or is it you send people to people's homes?
I do have a location in Westchester, and we also do pop-ups in Long Island because that's originally where I was before. So we have a lot of clients that we service there, and I work out of my friend's hair salon there. So it's really nice.
That's awesome. Out of all the things you do, what's like the most requested service that people ask for?
Definitely neurotoxins. Everybody wants Botox. Everybody wants, to be frozen, to not have wrinkles, to not move. So I'm here for it.
I love it so much. Do you feel like because you're in this industry, you're constantly like under pressure to like look perfect? Because you do, I mean, your face and your skin is perfection.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. I think that there used to be a lot of pressure in that space, and then the trends changed so much. I feel like it's so important to just do what you like best instead of following trends. I followed like the big filler trend for a while, then I spent a lot of time dissolving. And I think everybody's facial structure is different, everybody's anatomy is different, their wants, their needs. So I feel like it's such a personalized thing. I do feel pressure to look a certain way, but never pressure to follow trends.
Yeah. Well, speaking of trends, so I know that you live up north. You were down in Florida visiting. Do you think there are like different trends regionally? Like the faces that you see in Florida, are they different than the ones up north?
For sure. I feel like that goes with everything. I mean, usually you could see like I'm dressed in all black. That's a very New York thing. That's a New York aesthetic. I feel like when you go to Florida, it's a little bit more colorful. I think the same goes for people's surgery styles, their injectable styles, and stuff like that. I think that we tend to follow the trend and the look of others, and they end up, if you're in Florida, you're using similar doctors. You go to New York, you have your top doctors. So I feel like they end up having their own look, or aesthetic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That makes it's so crazy though. It's like our faces. And I mean, I definitely buy into it too. I'm like, what's the latest and greatest? Is there something that's coming around the corner that we should all be paying attention to?
I think peptides is the next big thing. It's, something that's more on the natural realm. I feel like a lot of people are more about getting younger from the inside out. So this is something that I definitely see trending, that people are loving their results, and it's definitely growing.
How often are peptides done? I'm very confused in peptide world. Like I've heard about it and it definitely sounds like something like I would be into because I'm like, yeah, I'll try anything. But
Yeah.
how often is it done? How do you figure out what peptide's best for you? Can you break it all down for me?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's going to be such a personalized thing. Everybody needs like a medical consultation. They need to speak to their, the doctor or whatever and have a conversation. But even for me, I knew that I was struggling with weight loss. I had put on like 15 pounds and it wasn't going anywhere. I mean, I was fasting, I was dieting, exercising, and I realized that with my age and my like hormones and other things, there were other things that were not allowing me to lose weight. So I decided to microdose on some GLP-1 peptides. And within a month, I lost all the extra weight that I was holding on to for 3 years. So for me, getting the inflammation down and seeing the benefits of that was tremendous. And I started exploring other peptides. And now I'm like, okay, there's ones for skin and hair growth and this and that. So I just started tapping into it myself. But what a great transformations are being made with these peptides.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I didn't realize it was kind of like GLP-1 adjacent. So now do you just get one syringe? Like, let's say you're on a GLP-1. Do you get one syringe with like the peptide in it as well? Or is it different shots? How does it
No,
work?
you would do different shots of peptides. So you would definitely incorporate what you need. And I love that it's so customizable. You could do based on, what your needs are. There's people that are doing like the copper and the skin ones and hair growth and, muscle building and fat melting. And it's a whole variety of peptides. And figuring out what's best for you and what you need is so nice because it's so custom to your body. Um, and your blood. You take your blood, you could look at it, see what you're lacking, see what you need, and really like have a perfect cocktail for you.
I love this. I want to ask you a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurialism because I know that you weren't always someone who was on that track. So tell me how you ended up owning your own business and how you got to like make this huge goal happen for yourself.
So it's pretty wild because I always talk about growing up, what a difficult time I had in school and learning and even finding things that I was passionate about. I struggled a lot in school. So I always looked at myself as like a failure because I'm like, if I'm not, top of my class and I can't like, you know, work as hard as other people or my focus isn't there. And then I realized as I got older, when I would, spend my time on things that I really enjoyed, how hyper focused I was. So I think for me, when I stopped kind of like going with the tide and started paying attention to the things that interested me and not what people told me I should be good at, I started to thrive and I started to build confidence in myself. I landed a job running somebody else's business, and that taught me so much. It gave me such great experience. And I think that that built me to a point where I'm like, if I'm doing this for somebody else, why not try to do it for myself? Um, and it gave me the courage to do it. I think a lot of it is self-confidence and believing that you can take that next step. And it was a giant risk. And I moved away from all my friends and family and I decided to take a step. And I'm not going to lie and say it was like, oh, it was so easy. It was a great decision. It's been very challenging and very hard, but very rewarding at the same time.
It's amazing. There's so much, I'm sure, risk in it. Were you ever like, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? Like, is
Oh,
everything I'm doing worth this?
100%. And I feel like people that just pretend everything's so easy is full of shit.
Yep.
It's it's very difficult, and every day you're making decisions that now it's like completely your business, your bank account, your life, where before you're making decisions for somebody else's business, it's kind of you could go with your instinct, where now when it's yourself, you're really deep analyzing everything and you have to learn to refocus and trust your gut again.
Yeah. How did you make that switch into having so much confidence to take the leap and invest in yourself in that way?
I think it's really important for people that want to build something. Like if the passion's there, never give up. I think it's really important to believe in yourself. And I think when I was around certain people that were getting things done and I would compare myself to them and I'm saying, well, what do they have that I don't have? Is it just the bank account? Then I could work on getting that. Is it the knowledge? Then I could take a course. Is it so I would kind of look at what I didn't know and try to educate myself or build up on that to, make me feel stronger and more confident. And that was my best tool. I'm always watching, whether it's like on YouTube, something that's like inspiring, something that motivates me, looking at what other people are doing. To me, the space isn't like a competition. I'm always like, how do we build each other, promote each other? I just have a different outlook, I think, on it, or at least try to. And it's been super helpful for me.
Oh, it's so good. And I think that is such important life advice for people. You have such perspective. And I want to dive into your journey to free little Vic and that whole experience that you're going through right now, and also hear about how you got to where you are now. So, can we take it all the way back to when you were a little girl growing up? Tell me about the neighborhood you grew up in and what it was like.
So, when I was very young, I lived in Queens, New York, and we moved to a nice neighborhood in Long Island. I think moving from a neighborhood where you have a lot of kids that are, you know, kind of grow up in a similar situation to a neighborhood that might be a little bit different. It was a beautiful neighborhood. I just don't think that people were used to picking up a newspaper article and reading about a family like mine and what we were going through. So, I think that for me as a young girl, around 9 years old, having a little bit different of a circumstance kind of made me feel a little more isolated than I already did. So that was definitely tricky. I think that, during that time, there was a lot of things I didn't understand about myself. One being anxiety. I had no idea what anxiety was. I don't think a lot of people really did either. It's strange. As many people as I know now that have anxiety, as a kid, it felt like this terror that I was feeling or these episodes, I was like the only one.
I
So that
totally
was,
relate. Yeah. It's so
yeah.
true. So you mentioned that there weren't a lot of people in your neighborhood whose families were incarcerated. How were you treated at 9 years old when your father got arrested and then your grandfather?
So it's funny, you start to realize, like, all the kids used to play outside, kickball or whatever it was, and there would be less and less kids coming around, less and less kids inviting you to play. They would kind of, kids that we always played with would be like turning the corner, running home, avoiding us. And, I understand it now looking back that, they didn't understand the situation. I think I understand it even more now as an adult. Reading comments that people write on the internet now, and I'm like, it's so funny, and I try like so hard not to judge people on circumstance or whatever because you really never know what's going to happen to you.
Mhm.
But a lot of people pass judgment based on things that they don't know, and that's just the world that we live in. So it was tough as a kid when I didn't understand it. Now I wish I could like talk to little girl Jackie and be like, it's literally okay. None of
Oh,
these people matter.
yes.
It's you're still going to be okay. Everything's going to work itself out. But I think as a kid, it was tough.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why I was so excited to interview you, is because I think your perspective as someone who went through all this as a little girl and now is fighting to get your grandfather out of jail is so powerful. I want everyone to hear your perspective. So if we could take it back to like when you started realizing that something was a little different about your family, when was that?
Um, I'm going to be honest. It wasn't until I started reading the newspapers. I mean, I knew my family firsthand that I'm like, I have the most loving parents, loving grandfather. We're so family oriented. We're doing all the things normal people do. Sunday dinners, going to church together, family vacations, just spending all the time. And, it wasn't until I started reading the newspapers and hearing about the arrests and everything that I noticed that something was different. I mean, for me, it's like you're a young girl, you basically idolize your family because they're the ones who love you the most and show you no negative sides. I don't see the perspective that the news media or the FBI put out. You have to understand that a lot of times as a kid, you would read these articles and you're like, wow, this is crazy. That this can't be true. Now, as an adult reading it, I see that it wasn't true. A lot of people don't realize that there is something called fake news, and that back then the FBI would push a narrative to get a certain outcome in a court case that they wanted. So prior to somebody's case, they would have this whole story of why they were going to jail or what was going on in the street. And then you don't realize till, like, for example, my father's acquittal, that 90% of what I was reading wasn't actually true.
Wow. Did you bring it to your mom and say, like, "Is this true?" And that's how you found out, or how were you able to decipher the
No,
truth from? Okay.
funny, as a kid, I would just read it and like internalize it. And I didn't ask the questions. And then as I got a little bit older, there was kind of a gap where I didn't understand. As a kid, you feel so sad that your father is gone or your grandfather is gone, and that your whole family is like ripped apart and your whole world feels like it's crumbling down. And then there's a point where you kind of want to get your own identity and kind of separate yourself from it. And that's when I dug deep into like my work life. And then it came a point where my grandfather ended up with dementia, and he would start calling me all the time, and it was like I see the innocence in him, and he's like a little child, and I'm like, how do I help this guy? So it's like waves of cycles of different emotions and feelings that you go through during the whole process.
Yeah, I think people lack so much empathy for the families that go through this. Those first few years when your grandfather and your father were away, how did your mother cope? And what did she tell you in terms of if someone comes up to you and says something about this, say this, or feel or process it this way?
I think I'm lucky that I came from such a strong family that, and I had a very strong personality myself. As quiet as I wasn't going to let anyone talk about my family in a negative way. I also had younger siblings that were going through it as well. And I felt more like I had to protect them. There was a lot of people that would, say things to them. And I felt as the older sibling, it was my job to kind of, step in and correct the narrative. But I didn't understand it so much until I got older.
Yeah. Did the system provide you any support as a family going through this? Is there anything like that?
Not. As a matter of fact, I had like debilitating anxiety, panic attacks. I had psychologists write letters to the judge to try to maybe listen, at the end of the day, when someone's incarcerated, they're in prison. They're in a cell, they're not moving, right? They're not free on the outside. So when the government won't allow a father to be placed somewhat close to the family, to me, it's like he's in jail anyway. He's in prison no matter what. If his prison was next door to our house, it's not going to make it any easier for him. But for me, as a young girl who couldn't get on a plane, they shipped my father to Leavenworth, Kansas. So the system did not help us at all. If anything, it's like they wanted to hurt us more because they felt like if they punish the kids, it's punishing the person that's incarcerated, and then they might get a different outcome. So they treat a lot of people. I know they definitely treated us poorly that way. I read stories about if there's someone that was, say, a rat, the government would place them in any prison of their choice. However, if you had small children that were suffering on the outside, they did not show compassion.
Wow, I did not realize that. How did this affect the way that you looked at law enforcement?
Well, I think it's funny because I think the world's kind of shifting now. You see a lot more of the government corruption coming out with different cases, and it's made a little bit more public, especially with like the newer administration. Um, they're bringing light to a lot of it. I think as a young girl, I never really trust the government. I saw lies that they put out. I saw that they would put their narrative out in newspapers. I saw all the grimy details of what the government was doing during my dad's acquittal. I mean, you have FBI agents that had really inappropriate relationships with their top informants. They were giving addresses to informants that were going out and killing people. They were responsible for the crimes that they were accusing my family members of being involved with. They withheld evidence. They did a lot of dirty things. And even today, you have a lot of informants telling stories about how the government would lie using informants' names to get illegal wiretaps or anything that they could to convict somebody of a crime. So it's very dirty tactics. I think I grew up knowing a lot about that, and it put my trust in government in a really, you know, um, a very small space. I know there's good and bad in all. I mean, the other side of my family, my grandfather was actually a Marine. He was a police officer. His father was killed on duty. So I see both sides, and I know there's good and bad in all walks of life, but it really did make it hard for me to trust deep state and government for
That is
sure.
so fascinating. So when your parents got together, was that an issue at all?
Not at all. My grandfather, as a matter of fact, my mother's father, who is the biggest teddy bear in the world, warmest grandfather. He actually, it's crazy because both grandfathers lost their dads at the same age. And they just, because of their life circumstances, ended up in different directions. But I have to say, he was such a warm, fuzzy person and adored my father. You know, he really did.
That's so nice. I want to ask you about little Vicarina. That is your grandfather. Tell me about who he was as a grandfather.
He was the best. I mean, I know everybody probably says that, but he was just such a warm, loving, generous, caring grandfather. He was all about family. He raised us to be, loyal, loving, to this day. I mean, my cousins and we're just so close. We're like siblings, all of us. So all of his children who had kids or whatever, we just grew up with like a certain understanding. We always stayed close. I mean, he was just a great, warm grandfather.
When he originally got sentenced, were you able to talk to him on the phone?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. You have to understand too. They give inmates like maybe a 15-minute phone call. So to spread that out between like his children and his wife and the grandchildren, you're lucky if you would get like a few minutes to talk to him, in a week or month. So
So
it was
painful.
hard.
Were you able to
Yeah.
visit at all?
So that was the thing too. When they were local and going through their court cases, they were in the state of New York. But as soon as they were convicted, even when my dad, he was acquitted of the bigger charges, but he did get 10 years on a plea agreement. As soon as they got their um, charges, they were shipped out of state. So, being that I had debilitating anxiety, again, I couldn't travel. I couldn't get on a plane. I couldn't, take a long car ride. I had a meltdown every time I left a visit. So it was very difficult. I would say from like 14 to 19, I did not see my father.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Were your siblings able to see him during that time?
Yes, they were able to go a little bit more often. Again, my mom had 5 children. Imagine trying to travel and then, have someone watch the other kids that are home and, go on these visits and like places like Kansas. It's not really, ideal. They make it very difficult.
When I think about your mom, that is just amazing to me that she managed all of this. Having 5 kids, having to figure out like what's going on legally with both cases, so much going on. What does she say looking back on this time?
It's funny. I feel like for them, they've gotten out of the trenches and they don't really talk about it much. I feel like me jumping on the bandwagon of like trying to fight for my grandfather has opened it up a lot. So I know it's like a lot of wounds and stuff too, but I think that she did such a phenomenal job, holding it together that now it's like she's kind of past that point. She's living her day to day life and she just gets to enjoy kind of being a grandmother. And that's why for me, I like to take the wheel with this journey and let them kind of sit back knowing that I'm trying to be on top of everything so that she doesn't have to stay in that space.
That's amazing of you. Okay, tell me how you got to this point where you're like, I'm going to fight to get him released.
So I guess it really started before COVID. I went to go visit him. I know his dementia was getting worse and worse. And it was like to the point where I went to visit him and he created like a new character for me. And I think he thought I was like his wife or somebody. And he started calling me like way more often than usual. And he was confusing who I was and the situation. And I started to really feel sorry for him. And I'm like, not only did we try for 35 years to get his trial looked at, I mean, there was so much evidence that was withheld. There was so much information that we did not even find out till, my father's acquittal, and then more information that came out even after that. Um, it was very difficult, I want to say, to process that and never feeling like he had a fair trial, but then to see his condition worsening. I mean, he needed a pacemaker put in. He's in complete heart failure. I watched him go from coming down in a walker to being completely in a wheelchair to not being able to feed himself. So as I watched him decline, my heart broke more and more. And I felt like this is just inhumane at this point. Not only are we not looking at his case and all of the things that were involved with it, all the corruption and the things he was never able to present in court, but now we're dealing with somebody that's just dying in prison. And I started to grow more and more passionate about it. And I just really didn't know what steps I had to take. So I started, I would pray a lot on it. I'm very big on like my spirituality. And I would pray that God would open doors. And it just seemed that like I would meet more and more people as this journey went along, and they would kind of guide me, like, talk to this one or talk to that one. And I felt like it was just God opening doors and me following. And the more I did that, there was more reform groups that I got in touch with, more lawyers, the more podcasts I did, more people were listening, the more information people would send forward. And it just started to really trigger and ignite a passion inside of me to really fight harder. And every time they said no, instead of getting discouraged and like getting upset like I would before, I'm like, yeah, no, this is my last shot. He's, not going to be around forever. He's 91 already. And in the condition that he's in, I just have to keep pushing. So I think that his, health decline really, fueled it for me.
I can only imagine. My father has cognitive issues as well, and I see his care and how hands on we have to be and how informed we have to be at all times. Does anyone in prison call you and say, "This is what's happening, we're going to change his medications," or what is the care like and the communication to you?
So I just recently found out, according to documents, court documents, the BOP stated that there's actually one doctor per 987 inmates in his facility. And this
Wow.
is a medical facility, and they're supposed to have like a cognitive unit. Um, one doctor. How is one doctor? And you got to think of even like a hospital. How many nurses per patient? So we have a medical facility with one doctor for that many patients. So you know that they're not getting the proper care. You know they're not getting the proper attention. You know that the other inmates that are sick are probably coming second, So to me, I mean, that's a scary space to think this is the medical facilities that we have lined up. At this point, we know there's certain inmates that, regardless of all the corruption in his case, we're looking at people that are dying. They're on their deathbed and they're getting worse and worse each day. And instead of saying, you know what, their family will foot the bill so that taxpayer money doesn't have to go to it, their family will get the doctors and the people that could manage his health. He can't even stand up or feed himself. He's obviously not going to do any crimes, commit any crimes whatsoever. His brain capacity is like, they know that his mental health, he's not even at the point where he knows his own identity. How would he even organize anything? He's really not a danger to anybody but himself. So it's really difficult to, even fathom that people out there would be against having someone like this released.
You touched on the monetary component of this. I know that studies say that it's like $40,000 to $60,000 to keep someone incarcerated for a year, and that's a healthy inmate. Have you ever tried to calculate the cost of how much this is costing to keep him behind bars?
I mean, you really can't. I think he's on like 30 medications. I know that he needed heart surgery. He was in complete heart failure. They had to do a couple of different procedures. I know that alone, if I have to go to the emergency room, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for these type of emergency conditions. So if he's being sent to the hospital at least several times every few months, and he's on all these medications and he needs someone to assist him in every function, I can only imagine what it's costing. I mean, he's had several pacemakers put in, emergency surgeries. He's diabetic. I could only imagine what the calculation is.
Does he have someone assigned to him to feed him?
So they say that there's other inmates that could, work as like a companion. I guess it's a job for them. But I know that there's some times where he doesn't call for a long time, and I say, "What's going on?" He's like, "I had no one to dial the phone." So I don't know how he's left off. I know that in medical reports, that when I put a request in for them, it'll take them 6 months to send me. It'll say that he can't hold himself up with the bars for more than 30 seconds. So, how are they showering him? How are they taking care of him? I don't know these things. And when you call to ask any questions, they remind you that he's an inmate and they're not allowed to give any information. Even if I don't hear from him for weeks and I put a call in and I'm like, I'm doing a wellness check. Can you please tell me if he's okay? You'll have people tell you, I can't give you that information.
This must be unbelievably grueling for you. I cannot imagine. I'm so sorry that you're going through this. Are there other markers of compassionate release that have happened that you can compare your grandfather's case to?
My grandfather is literally the poster boy for every single box that you could check off that should qualify for it. There's people that are a lot younger that get to come home, and I'm not saying like why them and not him. I do believe that anybody with health ailments and that really shouldn't be there. I do believe there's a reform. If after 35 years, which is a life sentence, this person has been incarcerated, never had any hiccups, bumps, or any problems in prison, has shown that he's participated in lots of groups for mentorship, and he became a Eucharistic minister and showed that he's gone in a different path. Why are we not looking at these things? Why are we looking at, well, 35 years ago, this is what he was accused of? Let's not look at the new information. Let's not look at the other stories that have come out, but let's just focus on the narrative that was put out, whatever was said then, and then let's crucify him forever based on that. It just seems like, what kind of world do we live in that we're not going to look at this by case, that we're not going to sit there and say, this man can't hurt anybody. He gave up his life. We're not talking about, it's just not normal to me. And I read a lot of the comments online. There's a lot of people that are so supportive and say, this man was railroaded. His charges did not match his crimes. There was never solid proof or evidence. The FBI was more involved than anybody. And you see all of these things of people that really do their research. And then you have people that write terrible things to you. And, you just think to yourself, God, I hope you never have anybody that you love or anybody in your family that gets wrongfully accused or gets put in that position, because people don't realize that it happens all the time. There was people that criticized me as a kid for my family, and then you know what? We got older and they've had siblings or friends or family that have been incarcerated or went through similar things, and it's like you never point a finger at people or judge them based on things like that because you don't know the full truth.
That's right.
Um, yeah, so it's again, it's very challenging. But I just feel like as people, we need to be a little bit more compassionate about people's situations.
Yes. Have you been able to move the needle forward at all?
So it's crazy because some days I feel so defeated. I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere. And then I'll talk to someone like my cousin Vicky, who is one of my best friends, and I'll talk to her and she's like, do you realize that like in 8 months you've come further than, we have in certain 8 month periods? And I look at it and I'm like, you know what? You're right. Um, Every time they deny a compassionate release, I refile. So I have that pending. I have a clemency application in. I've gotten to people at the heads of different, government departments. I have people writing letters. And so the progress is always ongoing. Getting my story out there, doing things like even today, you never know who's listening. You never know who will have information or who wants to help or who can help or can get, my story into the right hands. So it's just an ongoing process and you can't stop, you can't stop and say like, I feel like it's gone nowhere because every day that I'm doing something is a step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have spread your message so far. Like it made it to me before we even booked you on the show. So, congratulations on that because you are definitely spreading awareness. I want to ask you a question about organized crime in general. How do you view how it's viewed in the media and portrayed? Because I feel like people think it's so sexy and cool, and then this happens and they don't see the other side.
It's funny because for me, I like spent my entire life avoiding anything that has to do with it. And then you kind of see like, funny things where it's like the Sopranos or the Mob Wives aesthetic or this or that. And I kind of laugh and I'm like, I kind of get it because I think they're putting it into like a whole cliche, like type of stereotypical box and it comes off almost comedic. But in real life, when you come from a family that's accused of certain organized crime attachments and whatever, and you just see like the heartache and the pain and, the world being against you, it's a different lens for sure.
Absolutely. Jackie, before we go, I want you to tell me one message you want everyone to know about your fight, your grandfather, anything that you want to share.
I think my most important message, especially as an adult now and going through this journey, I didn't really know what my purpose was in this. And I think that it's important to show compassion. I think that if you have a relative that is incarcerated or going through anything, having support, being proud of where you come from, you know, showing them the support that you would want done to you is very important. I think having compassion for children, people that are affected by this life that are innocent is very important too. I think that, just trying to have an open perspective on people's journey and not being so quick to criticize is key. I think we could all work on being better people. I know myself, I'm quick to try to like, if I go to judge somebody, I'm like, let me, take a step back and really look at it in perspective. I think that's key. But definitely being a little bit more supportive of, our neighbors that are struggling and going through certain things, and definitely staying strong and fighting for your loved ones. Never give up. I think
That's right.
that's my important message.
Oh, that's such a good message. What's next for you in terms of this fight?
So, my grandfather's number one right now. I'm working on that for him, and I definitely want to keep getting involved with different organizations. I'm part of the Italian American Civil Rights League, and I got to pick an organization that we were going to work with for the toy drive this year. And it's one that takes care of children from incarcerated parents. People don't realize their parents are incarcerated. It's hard for them to celebrate Christmas and different holidays. So, we're going to do a toy drive for them. It's very important to just, keep doing and giving back and helping people that are going through what you're going through.
I love that so much. And just through researching your story, I found one of those organizations. So you are making huge change. So I hope that you're proud of yourself. How are you taking care of yourself through all of this?
Um, that's a good question. I'm definitely doing my peptides, staying on top of my Botox and IVs,
Yes.
and trying to unwind when I can.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you for being here. Where can people find you on social media and where can they follow Free Little Vic?
Okay, so on Instagram, it's Jackie O, JACKKIEO. The spa is Dose Med Spa, but it's dose_NY on Instagram. And Free Little Vic, of course, is at Free Little Vic. And the website is freelittlevic.com.
Well, Jackie, thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Shut Up, Tell Me More. You can find us on Instagram at Shut Up, Tell Me More. Remember to subscribe to the podcast. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, go to the show page and click the follow plus sign. If you listen on Spotify, click the follow button. You can also find us on YouTube. You'll automatically receive new episodes as they come out, as well as updates. Doing this also helps me algorithm land, so thanks in advance. Lastly, give me a 5-star review, and I'll be so grateful. See you in the next one.